Commissioners, do you need anything additional? Do you need any presentation at all from Catherine, or can we?
I'll make a motion.
I have 5 questions.
I'll make a motion. Is that okay?
Yes.
I move to appoint Mr. Robert Durham as the representative for agriculture on the fish screening task force.
Second.
Moved and seconded to appoint Mr. Robert Durham as the representative for agriculture on the fish screening task force. Can we just have this as a thumbs up, please, commissioners? Those approve. It's everyone, Michelle, so we're good to go on that one. And we'll move on to Exhibit F, which is the 2023 Pacific Halibut Fisheries Regulations. And for this one, we have Christian Heath.
And Chair Wall and Commissioners, Christian is on the Zoom. We spared him having to travel here from Newport.
Okay.
So it looks like they're queuing up his presentation, and I do believe it will be fairly brief. But Christian, it's yours whenever you're ready.
Okay. How do I change the slide numbers? Do I just let you guys know when I'm ready?
I think if
you want to just ask to be advanced.
Okay. All right. Good morning or good afternoon now, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Zanowitz, Commissioners, and Director Melcher. For the record, my name is Christian Heath. I am the acting project leader for groundfish and halibut with the Marine Resources Program located in Newport. I'm here today to talk about the 2023 sport and commercial Pacific halibut fisheries. Today, can you go to slide 2, please? Today, the commissioners are asked to adopt quotas, season dates, and management measures for the sport and commercial Pacific halibut fisheries in 2023. The halibut fisheries are federal fisheries, therefore staff will be recommending that the commissioners adopt these regulations by reference. Today, I will provide a brief overview of the management process and allow time for any questions the commissioners might have. The finer details, such as season dates and quota allocations, are provided in the agenda item summary. Next slide, please. Management of halibut on the West Coast is a team effort. The International Pacific Halibut Commission, IPHC, is responsible for the overall research and management of Pacific halibut in the waters off the US West Coast, Canada, and Alaska. Each year, IPHC conducts surveys to estimate halibut abundance and assesses the coastwide stock status for halibut. At their annual meeting each winter, IPHC determines the total annual coastwide catch limit, allocates harvest quota to the 10 regulatory areas, and adopts management measures. The National Marine Fisheries Service, or NMFS, represents the U.S. interest during the IPHC process, and at least one ODFW staff member attends the annual meeting to ensure coordination. Next slide, please. Oh, actually, hold on, sorry, go back one slide, I missed the bullet point here. On the West Coast of the United States, the Pacific Fisheries Management Council, or PFMC, develops annual regulations for Pacific halibut fisheries. ODFW ensures the interests of Oregon's halibut resource and stakeholders are represented in this process with a voting seat and membership in advisory committees held by many marine program staff. The Washington and California Departments of Fish and Wildlife, Washington Treaty Tribes, NMFS, law enforcement, and fishery stakeholders are also involved in the process. Because of the comprehensive scientific and public process at the international and federal levels, we are confident the resulting halibut federal regulations represent the best available science and the interests of Oregon stakeholders. Thus, our annual recommendation to the Commission is to adopt the federal regulations into Oregon Administrative Rule by reference. And next slide. Looking into the future of the fishery, we know that climate and ocean change could affect halibut biology, behavior, and stock distribution. IPHC has a robust program of biological and ecosystem research, including studies of migration, reproduction, growth, and genetics. The image on the right shows the many different survey stations throughout the range of Pacific halibut, many of which are sampled annually. The blue circle on the bottom right is Regulatory Area 2A, which includes Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. The images on the left show the near bottom temperature anomalies in degrees Celsius collected on these surveys during the summer months of 2015 and 2016, capturing the blob phenomenon during those years. IPHC scientists are working to understand predicted future conditions and how the stock may respond to environmental changes to help anticipate changes in distribution and productivity and inform decisions on sustainable catch limits. Halibut science and management is a highly collaborative process that brings together scientific expertise, stakeholder interests, and regulatory authorities from multiple regions and sources. This aligns with the key principles for coordination in ODFW's climate and ocean change policy. Next slide, please. During the Council's annual halibut management process, a catch sharing plan is developed each year, which specifies how the West Coast quota provided by IPHC will then be allocated among sectors and sub-areas for the West Coast. For Oregon, our allocation is nearly the same as it has been since 2019, so the proposed season dates for 2023 are very similar to what was adopted last year. For Oregon sport anglers, we have two main changes to the catch sharing plan. First, the Central Oregon Coast sub-area may begin on the 1st of May this year instead of mid-May. And second, anglers will now have the option to retain sailfish during all-depth halibut fishing and combine this with an offshore long leader trip if desired. Other changes to the catch sharing plan provide ODFW more flexibility to respond to fishing effort and halibut catch data during the in-season process. Examples of in-season management include closing a season when its quota is reached, moving quota from one sub-area to another to maximize opportunity, or potentially increasing the bag limit from 1 to 2 fish per angler. There are no changes this year for the commercial fishery. Next slide, please. Staff recommendations. Adopt recommendations as shown in attachment 3. Adopt the federal rules for Pacific halibut sport and commercial fisheries by reference, which include harvest levels, the 2023 Pacific halibut catch sharing plan, sport season dates, and commercial opening dates. Next slide, please. I move to amend on this slide, we have a draft motion in alignment with staff recommendations that we will be asking the commission to adopt. And with that, I will take any questions, and I thank you all for your time.
Any questions, commissioners, or comments? Commissioner Spellbrink.
Thank you, Chair Wall. First, a comment on the commercial end of things. I know the last couple of years they've moved that. That was once that they got down to like 10-hour openers on commercial, and now they're 3 days, which I think is great because you have trip limits for boats anyway, so you can't go over whatever your trip limit is for the size boat. And then also it just lets you take better care of the fish. A 10-hour opener, you basically had to set the gear out, run it back. Your fish didn't get clean till the end of the day. So now you have time with 3 days to actually make the sense, you know, bring them in, clean the fish, take care of them, get them ice. So anyway, it's just been, I think that's really been productive, is stretching that those commercial openers out to 3 days. When I first fished them, I fished them pretty much every year when I was actively fishing. It started out as like 10 days, then it went to 5 days, then 2 days, and then finally we ended up at 10 hours. So you can see that it made it a lot better to bring it back up to 3 days. Anyway, on the sport end of things, now I saw on in our handouts here the option to increase the halibut bag limit south of Cape Falcon from 1 to 2 fish per day bag through in-season action if the entire Central Coast sub-area all-depth quota is 200,000 pounds or greater. So basically that option would have been on the table. Is that right?
Chair Wall, Commissioner Spellbrink, that is correct. This is on the table. We're after some public meetings we've had last fall and this early spring. There was discussion on potentially going to 2 fish bag to begin the year. Many folks opted to prefer to save to make sure that we could save a summer season. So our staff recommendation is to begin the year with 1 fish, that we could very likely go into a 2 fish bag limit if the numbers are tracking similar as to what they were last year. We'll also be considering any bycatch yellow eye rockfish is found in those areas offshore a little bit. So we'll be tracking and monitoring that that bycatch incident as well. But it is possible, or it is likely, that we might go to a 2 fish bag limit early in the year. We just wanted to start with a 1 fish bag.
Commissioner Spellbrink, before you go on, will you repeat what the question was? It's hard for me to tell what he's answering. So will you repeat the question and what you heard?
A little bit of hard time too. It seems a little bit fuzzy, doesn't it? about, let's see, go back to whatever page I was on there. I can read it. Anyway, I think the option is on the table to increase the bag limit, which is, I think, set at 1 fish per day. Here it is. Okay, the option to increase the halibut bag limit south of Cape Falcon from 1 to 2 fish per day bag through in-season action if the entire Central Coast sub-area all-depth quota is 200,000 pounds or greater, which it is this year. So the option is on the table for staff to raise the limit from 1 fish that is now to 2. Okay, so I was just getting that on the table. Anyway, and then I know we had some testimony here, some public testimony that I just wondered if it was accurate. He said in the testimony here, he says the past 5 seasons on average, over half the Oregon sport quota has gone unharvested. And is that an accurate statement?
Chair Wall, Commissioner Spurblink, it's close to that. I cannot confirm off the top of my head. We have been very low on our harvest rates since 2019, since we went to this higher harvest quota. So yes, it has. We've opened up more and more opportunity because of this. Last year was the first year we had the spring all-depth fishery 7 days a week. This year we're expanding that to 7 days a week beginning May 1st instead of the mid-May. We have been going to a 2-fish bag later in the year. This year we wanted to have the option of going to a 2-fish bag earlier in the year. So that's what we got passed through on the federal side. That's where that over 200,000 pounds, we have that option to begin the year with 2-fish bag limit. We weren't able to go to a 2-fish bag until after, I believe it was Labor Day, or at least later in the summer. And now we've got that opportunity and that option earlier in the year to do in season. We were just a little hesitant to begin the year with a 2-fish bag since we're starting it May 1st. And last year was the first year we had 7 days per week instead of a 3-day fishery Thursday through Saturday.
Yeah, I guess my question would be, so it's open all of May this year. That's correct? Okay. I mean, if we pass this, so if you look at the catch rate or the amount of fish caught by the end of May, then there's possibility you could instigate the 2-fish limit sometime like even in June.
Chair Law, Commissioner Spurling, that is correct. We will be tracking the fishery very closely, and if the fish sizes are small as they have been, that I will point out that there's a 2012 year class that year class continues to get larger and larger, and that has dominated our catch the last couple of years. So that fish we're expecting to see a larger grade this year. But if the fish are still fairly small, the catch rates are similar, and we're tracking similar as we have been the last couple of years, we will look to go to a 2-fish bag limit as soon as we can.
Great. Okay. That's my questions. I think that sounds like it'd be a good idea.
Commissioner Laphart.
Thank you, Chair. Well, that's similar, but I just want to make sure I've captured this. So in one of the letters, and John or Kristen, you can maybe answer this question. So I know our sport quota is reasonable or conservative. We don't definitely want to go below that quota, but the quota was 315,856 pounds. And they caught about and they actually harvested 181,643. That left 134,000 pounds of fish uncaught, which is roughly 6,700 halibut and roughly 42% left uncaught. So if we're already at a quota that's fairly conservative, and now we've left almost half of it still out there. Are we being way too conservative on a fishery that we say we want people to catch? So help me. Where are we doing that?
Chair Wallen, if I might, before I'll let Christian jump in, or John as well, but for those of us who have been around here 2 or 3 or 4 decades, we remember all too well the period where we routinely exceeded our quota every year because the fishery would outperform expectations, and the level of disruption that's associated with closing a fishery prior to your expected closure date, that disruption, far outweighs the angst that's associated with, and I'll use the air quotes, underutilized or unutilized quota. So, we're really trying to make sure that any season structure we put in place will last through the duration of the season, so we don't have to have a closure. And hear what a disruption that is to not only charter operators, but as well as recreational anglers. And then at the same time, we have the flexibility in season to liberalize that bag limit if it's clear that we're going to be able to make it through the season. But we don't want to liberalize the bag limit and then have to come back and close the season early.
Correct. I totally agree with that.
So much disruption. So
my concern was almost 50% still being left out there. But what I hear you saying is we can address that maybe mid-season. And
we can address that earlier now because the framework the framework used to say we couldn't adjust it until after September, the bag limit, daily bag limit. But that framework has changed now, so we can adjust and address it earlier.
And don't read into this that I want us to go right up to the quota and I want us to maximize this, but I'm just thinking, wow, that's being pretty conservative.
Could I ask a follow-up question to that one? And maybe John, if you're here, or Christian, if you can hear me. The part of this calculation, I assume, is because we don't yet know if we will continue to have the smaller sized halibut. And if we do, that would help to explain why we left some of the pounds on the table, because each fish is smaller. But my question has to do also with what's the biological concern if it turns out we have another season of smaller than, these small fish. That seems like it's a biological concern.
Chair Wall, that's an excellent question. I've got a few comments on the last one too, so I'm going to try to answer a few of those comments right now. The 2012 year class is still that same year class. It is still larger fish. It's coming through the fishery. We had a low recruitment from 2006 to 2011, so we're dealing with that low recruitment period. It is still too early to tell what 2013 and 2014 are bringing us, but the 2012 is a very promising year class. We don't know to what magnitude yet, but it is proving to be a stronger year class. So that is a promising side on that end. I will point out that being in Area 2A down here in Oregon, Washington, and California, we are on the very southern edge of the stock of this species. So we have very little play at what the biological concern is. We are also well above the target fishing line. The fish are a healthy species. We're above the 40%. For halibut, we can fish it down to 30% optimum yield. We're above 40% right now. So it is not in, there's no current biological concern for this year or next year. They do a stock assessment every year at the IPHC level. And then I can't remember exactly what the questions were. Oh, I wanted to follow up. I just looked it up, and last year we left about 37% on the table, not 50%. So we did leave quite a bit on the table in 2022, but we did take a significant more than we did the year before, because that fish, that 2012 year class is getting larger, and we opened up more fishing opportunity last year. Like I said, last year was the first year we had 7 days a week in May and June, and this year we're expanding that to the entire month of May and June. So we're looking to get more and more opportunity without jeopardizing our summer fishery and without having too many bycatch concerns with yellow eye rockfish.
Thank you. It looks like we have one more question. Go ahead, Commissioner Spellbrink.
Thank you, Chair Wall. And I don't know, I had a little bit of a hard time understanding too. I don't know if it's just the audio, but yeah, actually, I think what he's saying is the seeing all those small fish is actually a good sign, good recruitment they have. So that's kind of a good sign that we saw all those small fish, unlike the sturgeon population. We're not seeing the small fish.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was that where was I? On the Halibut Commission itself does survey, and so they've got a pretty good handle on what the population is, and they're all this is set through in combination with them. So pretty well looked after.
Thank you. I think we might be ready for a motion if anybody's ready to make one.
I can make one.
I can,
I move to amend OAR 635 divisions 004 and 093 as proposed by staff in attachment 3.
second. Commissioner Spellbrink moved and Commissioner King seconded the motion that is to amend OAR 635 as read into the record. Those in favor, let's do a thumbs up, thumbs down. Those approving, it's everybody, Michelle. So we'll move on. Thank you all, and thank you, John and Christian. We'll move to Exhibit G, which is the ocean salmon fisheries and ocean terminal fisheries rulemaking. And I think we have Christine Millette ready. Come on up.
And Chair,
John just stays here.
and Chair Wall, while Christine's coming up, I'll just add just a little educational tidbit to the last agenda item in that halibut, like almost all ground fish species, the stock assessments are based on total pounds or metric tons in many cases, but total pounds. And so the yield, the optimum yield is calculated in pounds. But of course, our bag limit for recreational anglers is in fish, numbers of fish. So when you have a strong young year class that is largely small fish, and you're managing with, for instance, like we've done, a 1 fish bag limit, you're
under.
Yeah, your pounds go down. And that's part of the reason in the last several years that we've been underperforming in terms of quota achievement. On the commercial side, the commercial landing limits are calculated in pounds. And so it's in the same unit of measure that the quota is calculated in. So anyway, probably more details than you wanted to know, but it is an important consideration.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Zarnovitz, Commissioners, Director Melcher. For the record, my name is Christine Mallet. I'm the Ocean Salmon Technical Resource Manager for ODFW, and I'd like to talk to you today about the...
Move your mic.
I am so sorry. Is it on now?
Just move it physically. I think they're on. It just wasn't close enough.
Okay. Well, greetings again, Commission. My name is Christine Mallet, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife Ocean Salmon Technical Resource Manager, for the record. And I'm here to present you with the federal regulations for ocean salmon, regulations that were developed by the Pacific Fisheries Council. And in the end, I will ask you to consider to adopt those regulations by reference for state waters. So the first slide will just give you an overview of the PFMC process. I tell you pretty much the same thing every year, how it works. It's a robust public involvement process. Participating industry, environmental community representatives are all involved, and it's an iterative process by which a final set of regulations is developed that meets all ESA standards for applicable stocks in the Pacific Ocean, as well as other applicable laws such as NEPA and Marine Mammal Act. So the public process started in March with the development of 3 alternatives for public review. There was a public hearing conducted in North Bend on March 20th, and then in April, the council developed a single set of rules. This is just to orient you where these rules are applicable. So basically the big divider is Cape Falcon near the town of Manzanita. North of it is the Columbia River management area that includes the area in front of the mouth of the Columbia River. To the south, you see the Central Oregon coast that ends with Humbug Mountain near Port Orford. And then to the very far south is the Oregon portion of the Klamath Management Zone that reaches to the Oregon-California border. So this slide is most likely the most informative to you as we are going through a lot of information here pertaining to the protection of stocks of concern. So in general terms, the salmon fisheries are planned and managed to protect weak stocks from fishery impacts as the PFMC is developing final fishery plans through this iterative process that I spoke to earlier. Technical staff evaluate the status of dozens of individual Chinook and coho salmon stocks and examines how the proposed fishery scenarios are projected to affect these stocks. This slide depicts only a few that are most relevant to Oregon fisheries. And the 2023 criteria that you see here are representative of the National Marine Fisheries Service consultation standards. So first up, the most important stock for fisheries north of Cape Falcon is the Lower Columbia River Natural Tule Chinook salmon. And we are observing a standard this year of a total exploitation rate of no more than 38% in all Pacific Ocean fisheries from Alaska to Oregon, and that includes the Columbia River. The bottom two stocks are the primary restricting stocks for fisheries south of Cape Falcon. And for the California coastal Chinook salmon, the ESA consultation standard is no more than 10% of ocean harvest, or the 10% of the ocean harvest rate. This stock is assessed by using H4 Klamath River Fall Chinook salmon as a surrogate. And the stock has underperformed in recent years, and a precautionary approach was taken this year. In setting the allowable impacts, given the extremely low abundance forecast, Chinook harvest opportunities in Oregon were substantially constrained in the area south of Cape Falcon because of this weak stock status. Further, harvest of Sacramento River Fall Chinook is also very constraining to ocean salmon fisheries off Oregon and California this year. Sacramento River Fall Chinook salmon have had a pattern of low escapement in recent years, and the 2023 forecast is very low again. Further, in-river environmental conditions have been very poor. Extraordinary measures were needed to address these circumstances and to ensure that fishery management is not a contributing factor. The criterion seen here is a spawner escapement goal of 122,000 hatchery and natural area adult spawners. Onto coho stocks, the PFMC tracks and evaluates a myriad of West Coast coho salmon populations as well. And again, I'm just focusing on those pertinent to Oregon fisheries mainly. Lower Columbia River wild coho stock, the National Marine Fisheries Service consultation standard for 2023 is no more than 23% total exploitation rate in all fisheries, and projected impacts from this year's fisheries is anticipated to not exceed 18.9%. For Oregon coastal natural coho salmon, the standard for 23 is a total exploitation rate of no more than 20%, which is improved over last year when it was 15%. The projected impacts from 2023 marine and freshwater fisheries is expected to be 19.8%. So finally, ESA standards for the Southern Oregon, Northern California stock varies by population with an allowable total exploitation rate between 15 and 16%, and many marine fishery impacts the marine fisheries impacts in total are expected to be just under 2%. The remainder that you see here displayed is accounting for additional freshwater harvest. And here is the slide on the commercial seasons. That's pertaining to ocean troll salmon. the federally regulated fisheries in the area from Cape Falcon to Humbug Mountain. Open seasons in 23 are limited to the fall period only. Notable is the inclusion of non-marked selective coho salmon retention in September, up to a quota of 10,000 coho. During October, the commercial fishery is limited to shoreward of the 40-fathom line. The area south of Humbug Mountain is closed to all salmon retention. Overall, the commercial fisheries regulations are the most restrictive since the 2009 season. The recreational ocean fishery from Cape Falcon to the Oregon-California border has marked selective or adipose fin marked coho salmon retention from June 17th through the end of August, with a marked coho salmon quota of 110,000 fish. Starting in September, the area from Cape Falcon to Humbug Mountain is open for all salmon retention. However, only one Chinook salmon can be retained per day. The non-marked selective coho quota for September is 25,000 fish. During October, the open area is limited to shoreward of the 40-fathom regulation line, no coho salmon retention, and a 1 salmon per day bag limit. The area from Humbug Mountain to the Oregon-California border is closed to Chinook salmon retention. Which brings me to the staff recommendations. Commission action regarding the staff recommendation listed here to adopt to the 2023 regulations by reference for ocean recreational commercial salmon fisheries in state waters as proposed by staff and as reflected in the draft Oregon administrative rules shown in attachment 3. And I have a draft motion slide for you. But I'm also willing to answer any questions that you might have for me.
Thank you, Christine. Commissioner Spellbrink, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
Yeah, I can have one actually. I forgot to put it down, but I was just going to mention that I know there was some good public testimony, on pursuing some bubble recreational fisheries in areas like Tillamook Bay, and to take advantage of some returns, local returns of hatchery Chinook destined for our local rivers. And I know staff made an effort to implement some of these type of fisheries, but I think they ran into some complications. And I think John, I was talking to him earlier, he'd do a better job of explaining it than I did. I would do.
Yeah, so you want him to say what your question is, or you?
Yeah, he can just maybe mention why. I was just responding to some public testimony that was very good, and they were hoping to be able to institute some of these bubble fisheries. And I asked John the question, and he explained it, but he'd do a lot better job of explaining why they couldn't get that done.
Okay.
Yeah, Chair Wall, Commissioner Spellbrink. As Christine mentioned, the Sacramento and Klamath are just two really key stocks in California. They are intercepted off our coast in our fisheries. And so that's why you've seen a lot of press on, the big closures. It was because of these poor freshwater conditions have led to underperformance, under escapement for multiple years for both of those stocks. And so with another low forecast, for this coming year and the NIMS guidance for extraordinary measures, we looked at each of the fisheries through the lens of how could we best leverage access to our own relatively healthy coho and Chinook stocks while minimizing the impacts to the Sacramento and Klamath fish. So we kind of looked at each fishery individually, and there was a request for a spring bubble fishery, and we entertained that. But after considering the way the modeling works, and we closed the ocean fisheries to minimize those. The spring fisheries for both recreational and commercial Chinook to minimize the Sacramento and Klamath impacts. So reopening a bubble would it creates a slippery slope, how many bubbles, why not just reopen the area we had closed if you're going to be assessed, the same amount of impacts to Sacramento fish. The modeling just isn't fine enough to split out bubbles. So based on all that, we opted not to do the spring Tillamook bubble, but we're still working on fall opportunity, probably, in the Chetco or Elk areas. But
that was going to be my other question was, yeah, so there's still potential that we might be able to get some of those fisheries implemented.
Could I ask a follow-up to that one before you go to your next question?
That was it for me.
Oh, okay. And I don't know where in my paper storm the reference is to the Chetco and I think you said the Elk. What would it take to open those? Because that, with the low numbers that we're getting, what would we have to do to show that that would be a safe thing to do?
Chair Wall, we just had a meeting, one of our first meetings was it last week, I think, with district staff and got our forecast for the different terminal runs. And, we're just getting started looking at the data and coming up with ideas and approaches. We also, just earlier this week, got some data from NIMS modelers and looked at the relative impacts those fisheries could have on Klamath and Sacramento fish, and did some modeling, and they're quite low. Particularly the elk there's almost no impact, and the Chetco is very minor. So we're trying to look through that same lens again and see, is it a good return on investment? And so we're just starting on that process, but we're trying to do due diligence and
this is fall Chinook, right?
This is fall, yeah.
So would we also at the same time look at the Chinook or the Elk River is where that was the non-viable one that we had. So it's not just it's bad enough to have to look at any impact from the Klamath and Sacramento, but that run itself there's just been enormous work to try to bring it out of the non-viable category. So I hope we would also look at that, not just, it's kind of a double piece on that one.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I should have mentioned that's part of what we're doing right now is looking at all the different parts of it rather than just saying, yeah, we're going to, open that fishery. So we'll look at the impact on local stocks and California stocks and try and pull something together, but we need a little time.
Thank you. Any other questions? Just 1 second. Nope, those were all on mine. Is there a motion on this one?
Yeah, I'll move to amend OAR 635 divisions 003 and 013 as proposed by staff in attachment 3.
A second.
And moved by Commissioner Spellbrink and seconded by Dr. King, Commissioner King, to amend OAR 635 as read into the record. Those in favor, let's do a thumbs up, thumbs down. It's everybody, Michelle, on that one. And so we will thank you both, and we will move to item G. H. Sorry, we just finished G. I need another paper storm. So we will be, I'll read the title, determining whether a petition to list southern resident orcas as an endangered species presents substantial scientific information to commence a rulemaking process. And this is your day, isn't it, John? You're here again. Well, go ahead and will you do introductions, please?
Yeah, good afternoon, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Zarnowitz, Commissioners, Director Melcher. For the record, my name is John North, Deputy Fish Division Administrator for the Marine and Columbia programs. And with me is Mike Brown, the Marine Mammal Program Leader. We're here today to help you determine whether a petition you received recently meets the criteria to commence with rulemaking. Next slide. Specifically, we will be discussing the petition you received on February 16th from the Center for Biological Diversity, Defenders of Wildlife, and the Whale and Dolphin Conservation, requesting adoption of a rule listing the southern resident orca population as endangered under the Oregon Endangered Species Act. Next slide. As per Oregon Regulatory Statute 496.176 and Administrative Rule 635-100-0110, any person may petition the Oregon Fish and Wildlife Commission to add, remove, or modify the status of a species under the Oregon ESA by adoption of the administrative rule. The petition must clearly indicate the action sought and present documented scientific information about the species' biological status to warrant the action requested. Within 90 days of receipt of the petition, the commission must advise the petitioner in writing whether the petition meets the criteria to warrant the action requested. If that petition does meet the criteria, the commission shall then commence with rulemaking with a final determination concerning the requested action due within 1 year of the receipt of the petition, except there is an option for a 1-year extension if warranted by the commission under certain situations. Next slide. So in order to determine if the petition presents documented and substantial scientific information about the species, Mike and I conducted a literature review on current information on southern resident orcas in order to compare with the petition. And for our presentation today, we'd like to share a brief summary of the information on southern resident orcas, and in doing so, hopefully help you to determine if the petition meets the requirements in statute. We will briefly touch on the biology, population status, habitat, key threats, and validity of the petition. Next. So orcas are often referred to as killer whales and are widely distributed within a global population of around 50,000 individuals, and they are the largest member of the dolphin family and a top ocean predator. They're highly social and long-lived, and with an average lifespan of 30 to 50 years, but apparently they can live as much as 80 to 90 years. The females mature from age 10 through 17 and remain reproductively viable for up to 30 years. However, births are limited to once every 5 to 8 years. Approximately 2,500 orcas reside in the Eastern Pacific Ocean, including the offshore, transient, and resident ecotypes, which overlap somewhat in habitat use but differ in diet, behavior, and genetics. The resident ecotypes include the northern and southern populations, which are both fish eaters, focusing on a variety of salmon stocks, especially Chinook, but these are separate populations and not known to interbreed. Both resident populations are federally listed, with the northern residents listed as threatened in 2003 under the Canadian Species at Risk Act, and the southern residents listed as endangered under the US ESA in 2005. Based on the latest population, there are only 73 individual southern resident orcas remaining, which are distributed among 3 separate pods, the J, K, and L pods. And that's compared to the northern resident orcas, which number over 200 individuals, and the population there is gradually increasing. The graph produced here from the NIMS 2021 status review shows 2 major periods of decline for the southern residents. The first period, noted as A, is the result of direct capture and removals for marine parks, roughly between about 1965 and 70. And then following that, there was a period of growth through the 1980s and into the early 1990s. And then following that, there's been a general declining trend, which is the interval labeled as B on the graph. And the reasons for this more recent decline have been the focus of substantial research, which has identified multiple threats to the population, which we'll touch on in a little bit. Next slide. So unfortunately, the projected trajectory for the southern resident population does not look very positive. A viability analysis modeling updated in 2021 to include the known threats indicate that the southern resident population will continue to decline regardless of what time series for fecundity and survival is used. The most optimistic view results from using data from 1985 through 89, which is noted in green section on the graph. There's a line, and then there's kind of a variance band around that. And then unfortunately, using the most recent 5-year data from 2017 to 21, as noted in blue on the graph, indicates that the population will decline from current levels to about 40 individuals. Uh-oh.
Oh. It's not going back. What's happening?
There we go.
Apologize.
So again, in blue, using that more recent data, it shows pretty much a decline from the current level to about 40 individuals by 2045. The southern resident population spends considerable time from May through September annually in the San Juan Island area of the Salish Sea, but the K&L pods also spend time during the winter in coastal waters off Oregon, Washington, and California, ranging as far south as Monterey Bay. After the federal ESA listing of southern residents in 2005, the NIMS designated critical habitat for inland Washington waters in 2006, and that's shown in the light blue tucked up on the south end at the top of the map at the south end of Vancouver Island. Followed by a second critical habitat designation in 2021, which added about 16,000 square miles of coastal waters from Washington to central California, and that's displayed in the dark blue band on the map. And the intent of that designation for the region off of Oregon was primarily for passage and migration corridor. So moving to the next slide. As we previously mentioned, there's several key threats have been identified for the southern resident population, including a scarcity of prey, contaminant accumulation, and disturbance from vessels. The population also is at high risk from oil spills, and inbreeding has been shown as a key limiting factor. However, the reasons for the decline of southern resident orcas are very complicated, and despite being studied for over 40 years, including focused research in the last decade, it's unclear which of the threats is the most limiting to recovery. And also, the threats likely interact to produce additive effects. Next slide. So given their importance as a food source, reduced abundance and quality of Chinook is considered a key threat for southern resident orcas as it relates to stress, health, and survival. The Southern Resident Orca Task Force identified increased production of Chinook as a primary need, and subsequent actions resulting from that task force have led to additional hatchery production of Chinook salmon, improved habitat protection, and efforts to address salmon predation. The regional abundance of Chinook can also affect the habitat use of orcas. A recent study found that the southern resident occupancy in the Salish Sea declined by more than 75%, consistent with the reduced abundance of Fraser River Chinook. The authors of that paper suggest that declines of this stock may be driving southern residents to forage in areas outside their normal core summer habitat. And however, and I think this is important, information on southern resident foraging efficiency is very limited, so determining the abundance and density of Chinook salmon needed for survival and successful reproduction remains unknown. On contaminants, oh, that's it. So contaminants are another key threat that may be limiting recovery of southern resident orcas. Pollutants enter the ocean from many sources and progress up the food chain to accumulate in long-lived predators. Persistent organic pollutants, or otherwise referred to as legacy contaminants, are a particular concern since high concentrations have been linked to endocrine, metabolic, and immune disruption, as well as cancer, decreased reproductive potential, and increased calf mortality in orcas. And the third threat results from direct physical and acoustic disturbance from vessel traffic, I believe primarily in the Salish Sea area. Ship traffic in this area is concentrated and whale watching activity has increased significantly over time. Noise from vessels can interfere with the orca's ability to use sound, which in turn disrupts their feeding communication and orientation. To address these issues, the state of Washington has implemented a variety of programs and rules to restrict vessels operating too close to southern resident orcas. And on inbreeding, although individuals of reproductive age dominate the southern resident population, over half of the offspring born between 1998 and 2015 were sired by two specific males, raising concerns over inbreeding depression. And a recent study has shed further light on this issue by documenting that the small size and isolation of southern resident orcas has led to significant inbreeding, resulting in much shorter lifespans and reduced reproductive capacity. The authors of that paper found that highly inbred female orcas, southern resident orcas, are only producing 1.6 offspring over their reduced lifespan compared to 2.6 offspring for females with lower levels of inbreeding. So in conclusion, comparing the summary of southern resident orca information presented in slides 3 through 15 based on our literature review with the information presented in the petition, we believe the petitioners have documented substantial scientific information on the biological status of the southern resident killer whale distinct population segment sufficient to justify proceeding with the requested action. Therefore, we would recommend the commission determine the petition is warranted and respond to the petitioners acknowledging that it meets the requirements outlined in statute. And then under next steps, if the commission decides to proceed with rulemaking, then a final determination on whether a listing is required is due by February 16th of next year, unless the commission determines that other considerations or limited information would necessitate an additional 12-month extension. And if the petition is accepted, staff will probably need to begin preparing for a listing determination by further assessing life history requirements of the population, evaluate geographic use in the state, determine the adequacy of existing state and federal programs to protect the species, consider the benefits of state listing, and develop survival guidelines. So our final slide is a draft motion for your consideration. And that concludes our presentation, and we'd be welcome to attempt to address any questions you might have.
Thank you. Commissioner King, we'll start with your question.
Thank you, Chair Wall. Thanks, guys, for your report. I could probably ask Dr. Khalil to my left, but I'm just trying to understand the difference. I guess they're different pods, the northern and southern distinct population, correct? And they're different subspecies. Thank you. And then which ones are in the San Juans? Where do these ones go? I get it all confused. So sorry. Please help me.
Chair Wall, Commissioner King. Yes, this is all new to us too, but primarily we're talking about the Salish Sea area, which is that inland waters wrapped around the Vancouver Island. It used to be considered like the Strait of Georgia and the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and it's, I guess, been renamed. And it includes Puget Sound.
Okay, so is this the pods that are in the San Juans, or is that the northern part?
Chair Wall, Commissioner King, my understanding is there is overlap a little bit in the northern and southern, occupancy or habitat use areas. The southern residents are very heavily used in that Salish Sea area, and then travel north or south, excuse me, whereas the northern residents use that area some, but are primarily distributed further north.
Thank you.
Commissioner Spellbrink then.
Thank you, Joel. I was just looking through some of the information here. Mentions that depending on the season, Chinook accounts for approximately 50 to 100% of their diet. In midwinter through spring, the time of their highest use of our coastal waters, Chinook accounts for 70 to 80% of their diet. So, I mean, to me, that would indicate that they, they like our Columbia River spring Chinook, because that's about the time our Columbia River spring Chinook is showing up here. So I agree with him on that. That's my favorite fish too. Anyway, so that's probably an important source in their diet. So if we're looking for one to enhance, that'd probably be a good one. That was just a comment.
Dr. King, you had.
I have another question. Thank you. I think you said Washington is increasing their hatchery specifically of Chinook. Is that correct? And are we doing that or not?
Chair Wall, Commissioner King, there's been quite a bit of activity across the board, if you will, especially in Washington. Governor Inslee initiated some executive orders that implemented a whole bunch of activities, including significant enhanced production of Chinook to try and address the prey issue. There was also habitat and stream restoration work, and there's a lot of literature on that I'm not well versed on. But in Oregon, we participated in the Southern Resident Orca Task Force, and that resulted in enhanced production in our state of over 2 million additional Chinook. That was part of that package. And yeah, so does that?
Yes. And when did that happen? And are we having any effect? Is it improving things? Or is it too soon to measure?
Chair Wall, Commissioner King, I think this is one of those things that'll take a while. There's a pretty big delay in the whole salmon cycle, and then the response from the orcas themselves.
Yeah. Thank you.
Vice Chair Zonowitz. To follow up on that question, so when the runs increase in size as a result of these hatchery fish coming back, are we going to then be sure we don't allocate that out to our fisheries if we're trying to provide them for the orca?
Chair Wall, Commissioner Zarnowitz, very good question. I think there's a lot of moving parts here. There's trying to increase the prey. The general, following that task force, I believe the general concept was to try and increase the overall prey availability of Chinook by around 4 to 5% to try and help the southern resident orcas. There will be potentially some effects on fisheries. The Pacific Fishery Management Council has implemented a threshold to so that we don't drop. If we drop below that for our ocean abundance of Chinook, it would trigger actions to address fisheries and closure areas. If it's more than that, yes, some fisheries will benefit. There's also issues on the end of the spectrum too, with percent hatchery origin and hatchery straying. And so I think there's a balancing act that will have to occur in all of this. But
one more question, John. Could you say a little bit, there was the task force and Oregon participated, and there were some actions that would be a place to start if we got to that point. Could you say a little bit more about what those actions might be, or we can follow up? You can get it to me later if that's better, but there was that task force that already began to look at some of the solutions.
Sorry for the delay, Chair Walt.
That's
I was trying to have some notes on that. Well, yeah, the task force identified a wide variety of potential actions that, like 39 actions. And then I think they came back and added some more to that. And, you know, some we can address and some are much more difficult.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think Washington has made some progress. Or I should say they've implemented programs to try and address things, but you know, fixing pollution or something it's very global and it's so large, it's hard to just, you can't just fix it. And basically, you know, probably our most in Oregon, our action, the one we have the most control over related to the 3 threats is probably enhancing, you know, production. But then as we just discussed, there's ramifications of that. There might be other things you could do like vessel distance, buffer zones, but we're just not quite in the same situation as like the Salish Sea and Puget Sound where they're concentrated pods with whale watching opportunity. It might be much more challenging along our coast where they just kind of pop up and then they're gone again. So you could enact some things, but the effect they would have, I think are less clear. But.
The one other thing I would, and I don't know that this is exactly a question, but Oregon has been pretty active in looking, you know, if we're looking at it's kind of a short list of things that we can, at the end of the day, we can do. We can increase the food that they have with the Chinook. We can do something about the toxics, or we can do something about the vessel impacts and noise. But Oregon's been pretty active in looking at some of these habitat pieces, and I couldn't agree with you more that they're very big and they're complex, and it's, you know, it's beyond our borders, but Oregon has been working pretty hard on some of those issues, and I would say taking a leadership role in those issues of spills to have more Chinook and other species in the Columbia, to support looking at the services that the dams provide, and if we could find a solution to that, can we breach in order to have more of these? So I couldn't agree with you more that there is that difficulty of these kinds of issues. I think that's the name of the game that we're in with these big issues like that. But it does seem to me that there, you know, the ESA may not in Oregon, and we've heard this earlier, you know, may not have the teeth that some people would like it to have, but it certainly brings focus and attention and perhaps an ability to bring more funding to it. So it seems like that's part of and again, I don't have a specific question on that, but it does seem like it's a framing issue and helps us at least look at these issues. So go ahead, John.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I did want to add that, you know, Oregon hasn't checked as many boxes as Washington has, you know, coming out of the task force process. But Oregon has spent thousands of dollars, or, you know, a lot of money on litigation over the effects of Columbia River hydro system on behalf of salmon recovery. And much of that has been focused on the recovery of Snake River spring and summer Chinook. Mm-hmm. Oregon also invests a lot of funding in fisheries management measures to ensure that our harvests are sustainable and provide a prey base for the killer whales. We've also led the nation in salmon recovery efforts through actions like our Oregon plan for salmon and watersheds. And we've also, our hatchery system provides substantial amount of prey for southern resident killer whales already. So a lot of what we contribute has already been in the works for quite a while.
Wish it got easier. We have 3 commissioners.
There's 3 of us, sorry.
Okay, Commissioner King, and then Commissioner Spellberg, and then Vice Chair Zarnowitz.
Yeah, I'm just thinking out loud. Like you said, Oregon has done a bunch of things that benefits. The question is, how does it in a way benefit all? You know, for example, like Commissioner Spellberg was talking about the record smelt run. you know, people out there dipping nets weren't the only people after those smelt. Like, I mean, there were sea lions, seals, everything was everywhere. I mean, it was really just like a battle out there. It was crazy. And I just wonder if we're doing all these things to increase Chinook, which, you know, helps hopefully the orca, and that's their main food source. What, like, I guess what I'm saying is, are we just also making more of a food source for the sea lions to eat more of them? It's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, how do we balance other marine mammals? How do we, you know, this is going to be really like, you know, trying to balance pie plates, you know, on the sticks kind of thing. So just wondering what your thoughts are on this.
Chair Wall, Commissioner King, yeah, that's a good point. We're not going to be able to take away from the sea lions. Obviously, it's an open system, so the sea lions will be there. We do have efforts in place to manage the sea lions at this time, Section 120F. But I think, you know, if we produce more Chinook for southern resident killer whales and any other predators, it's just, it has more abundance of fish for everybody. And that means that there'd probably be more that escaped, you know, made it come back from the ocean or was released and made it out to the ocean. I don't know if you would have anything to add to that, John.
Commissioner King, I guess I would just add that I think in the NIMS recent review, 5-year review, I recall seeing that predation by pinnipeds on Chinook has now exceeded any consumption by killer whales. So you're, to your point, yeah, everybody's competing for those, whatever we produce, and it might not all go to the killer whales, but.
Right. Well, I'm just wondering, I mean, gosh, you wish they would, like, you know, take out a sea lion or 5 and just kind of, you know, bring the scales back, because I know that there is measures to control the sea lions, but don't they have to be a problem? And then, you know, if they catch them in the dam, I mean, it's all kind of involved. But I just wonder if, like, we just keep pumping out Chinook and the sea lions just keep coming because they're smart enough to figure it out.
Chair Wall, Commissioner King, yeah, you're exactly correct. We do management at Bonneville Dam and Willamette River, Willamette Falls, and we don't have authority below the I-205 bridge, basically River Mount 112. So anything that's going on in the lower river, besides, unless it's in a tributary, there isn't any pinniped management happening. So you're exactly correct. If we produce more fish, we'll bring more pinnipeds. That's a possibility.
Okay.
Commissioner Spellbrink.
Thank you, Chair Wall. Yeah, at least when the sea lions get to them, they've already passed the orcas anyway, because the orcas, you know, have access to them in the ocean. The sea lions really don't get them until they get in the river. But, you know, on the other end of things, I know as far as Columbia River problems, you know, it's fairly recent data, I know, and I don't know what the most recent is, but this is, you know, fairly recent. I haven't seen the last few years, but I know, just example, bird predation, you know, double-crested cormorants, and I think Caspian terns are not as bad as they were, but I know I saw, you know, data from not too long back where I think the estimate was like 100 million smolts coming out of the Columbia River headed for the ocean. In the estuary, between the cormorants and the Caspian terns, I saw an estimate they were eating 25%, or, you know, of the 100 million smolts, they were eating 25 million of them. You know, 1% return on those, if my math's right, is like 250,000 fish. You know, so there's a ton of fish that are going through the birds there at the mouth of Columbia also.
Thank you, Commissioner Zarnowitz.
So if, say we accept the petition and start rulemaking, then other agencies that have authorities in the state waters, in the ocean where the orca are, would they be involved in some of the actions, such as maybe Marine Board, or I don't even know if it's Coast Guard or Marine Board, maybe doing 1,000-foot buffer around any activity of, probably should be any whale, but because there are whale boats I know down in Southern Oregon that go out of Gold Beach and maybe Brookings, but we have endangered species down there too. So would that be part of any rulemaking to see would that trigger, I guess, maybe other agencies that have authorities in the ocean to take action?
Chair Wall, I can jump in on that. I think it's going to be very analogous to the process we just went through with the marble murrelet. And we'll go through, of course, we're just asking you today whether you want to initiate the process. We're not making, ultimately you can decide what, to not list or to list. And but if we do go through the process 1 year or 2 years from now, then we'll be in the same place that we were here today with marble murrelets. We'll be looking at the other agencies, in this case, not land owning agencies, but agencies that have a nexus, I guess. We'll work on that, but a nexus with southern resident killer whales. And certainly the Marine Board will be one because they do manage boating activity. Perhaps state parks, perhaps the Department of State Lands, because they both have, and perhaps the LCD, because they all have Coastal Zone Management Act programs. But we'll get to those details as we move through the process.
Okay, thanks. Let's do one more question. Okay, 2 more questions, and then we have 6 people who would like to testify. So is yours a follow-up question, Commissioner Spellbrink, or should we
Yes,
go?
just on the fact that now they are listed at this time federally, right? So, and I think up till now, Oregon has kind of been on the same plane of that. Means we've basically been following the guidelines from the federal listing, haven't we?
Chair Wall, Commissioner Spellbrink. Yes. As far as I know, we relied on the federal listing in the absence of any state listing, and I guess that's the question at hand is when we come back to view this, what will a state listing add to what the federal listing already does? So.
Commissioner Hatfield, thank you. Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde.
Yeah, just quickly, I want to say that this really harkens back to our tour that the commission got to take yesterday and how interconnected all of these issues are and how discouraged I feel that, first of all, it's extremely sad that these orcas are not doing well. But I feel so frustrated that we'll go through this process and then we'll do a lot of work and we'll do another ESA plan potentially. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do this. I will probably support this, but really what we need, like when I think about it, last 2 weeks ago, I got to be there in Fort Klamath where they're putting the tags in the fall Chinook that they're trying to release in Klamath, just to see kind of where they're going to go above those dams right now in a few years. And just kind of, there haven't been Chinook there for 100 years with those dams. And so, but I'm very acutely aware of all the work we need to do. And it's a partnership between landowners, the federal government, the state, so I guess I've watched the ESA on the federal level for a long time. And as much as I'd like to think that, the ESA listing is going to, create some sort of magic, I think the magic comes when there's this real big lift effort, and the upland tributaries in this state that connect to anadromous fish need billions of dollars of investment. So I don't know what else to say other than I feel like we get, I don't know. What did you say a minute ago, Commissioner Wall? Chair Wall, you said your clutter of paperwork.
Oh,
right?
paper storm?
Paper storm. It's just, this is like, okay, let's create more paper storm. But are we actually creating a vision for Oregon and for, the fish that then feed the orcas that, feed us? That, I don't know. I'm just talking and we're tired. We need to get on and listen to testimony.
With that, let's thank
let's
you.
Listen to people.
Let's get some people up here to tell us what their testimony is. And we'll just go through the list as it's listed, and some are here in person and some are here virtually. So I'll read the people. Quinn Reed, then Sophia Ressler, Colleen Weiler, Kathleen Callaghy,
away from the ocean.
Deborah Giles, and Joy Primrose. So Quinn Reed, go ahead. And then Sophia, I think, is virtual.
Yes.
Go ahead, Quinn.
Chair Wall, Vice Chair Zarnowitz, members of the Commission, Director Melcher. My name is Quinn Reed, and I'm here today on behalf of the Center for Biological Diversity and the Oregon Wildlife Coalition. Also, for the record, my 4-year-old shoved this in my purse this morning and insisted that I needed this for work. So I just want everyone to know that this is why I'm holding a crab claw. Good vibes all today. I'm here to testify in support of the petition to list southern resident orcas as endangered under the Oregon Endangered Species Act. The center is one of the petitioners and one of 30 local and regional organizations who wrote to you asking you to be a champion for the 73 remaining southern resident orcas and accept the petition. The question before you today is a simple one. Does this petition present substantial scientific information to begin rulemaking? The answer, according to ODFW staff, is yes. I know today is not the day to debate the merits of listing. That's a question for the future, if the commission hopefully elects to proceed with rulemaking. But the southern resident orcas need all the help they can get. Something I hear repeatedly is that the Oregon ESA just doesn't do enough. It's not good enough. It's not going to do everything we need it to do. But the lack of a perfect solution is not a good reason to do nothing, especially when we're talking about extinction. That graph that John showed earlier was so stark, showing that downward trend for the species. It's now's not the time to do nothing. It's the time to do everything we can. These orcas are beloved to a lot of people in Oregon and throughout the Pacific Northwest. I certainly want to know that we're doing everything that we can here in Oregon. Despite the existing protections for the southern residents, their population has failed to recover. We need protections at multiple levels of government and across the region to give them a fighting chance at survival. And state listing sends an important signal that Oregon is in this fight too. And we believe that state listing will make a meaningful difference for the orcas. We've seen just earlier today that one of the greatest assets of the Oregon ESA is how it prompts collaboration among state agencies to save our most imperiled species. But that collaboration won't happen without listing, without this commission signaling to other state agencies and to the public that these orcas matter. And Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde, to your earlier question, I think that this process presents a perfect opportunity, especially when done in good faith, to create that vision, that statewide vision, the leadership to save this species and to identify those gaps in protection where Oregon can make a meaningful difference. So I think this is the right process. It's absolutely the right opportunity to create an exciting vision that we can all work together collaboratively on. We sincerely hope that we will have the opportunity in the near future to discuss in detail the many benefits of state listing for the orcas. I urge you to adopt the ODFW staff recommendation to accept the petition and initiate rulemaking. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait a minute. We have the person online, Sophia Ressler. Go ahead.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Great. As mentioned, my name is Sophia Ressler. I'm an attorney at the Center for Biological Diversity, and I live in Bend, Oregon today. And I am testifying along with Quinn on behalf of the center's 31,000 members and supporters in the state. And I actually hesitated to put that number in because I don't think it properly reflects the number of center members and supporters invested in the survival of Southern residents, nor does it encapsulate the interconnected role that all of the West Coast states and British Columbia play in ensuring the survival of the Southern residents. And Oregon thus far has taken somewhat of a backseat to the very specific Southern resident recovery that Washington and British Columbia has been a part of. And that has left potential gaps where a listing under the State Endangered Species Act could help to provide the time, resources, and collaboration necessary to fill those gaps and work to ensure the protection and recovery of the population. As Quinn just talked about, we've heard some say that the State Endangered Species Act doesn't really have teeth and isn't the proper tool to save the Southern residents. But I will agree that the state ESA is by no means perfect, but a listing pursuant to the act is going to help facilitate important conversations on things such as vessel noise regulations, water quality, further conversations about management of the Columbia River and the nearshore and toxic contaminants, just to name a few. And I know Commissioner Zarnowitz mentioned this earlier, but just this week, the Washington legislature, based on a recommendation from Governor Inslee's Orca Task Force, passed a bill that will require both commercial whale watching vessels and recreational vessels to stay 1,000 yards away from the Southern residents in Washington waters. This is an incredibly big and important step, considering that vessel noise is really the one issue that humans can have a pretty immediate impact on. And it's just one example of a very impactful state action. We're also hoping that NOAA is going to take its cue from the states when promulgating further federal regulations on vessel noise. And so this is definitely an area where Oregon could play a vital role. Listing the Southern residents is also advantageous in a very simple way. It sends a public message that these are Oregon's whales too, and that Oregon recognizes and is willing to fight for the survival of this critically endangered population. Thankfully, we don't have to really get into all of that today because the decision to actually list these whales is not what you have to determine. We're just asking that you recognize that we have presented credible science that merits looking into this further and support the department's recommendation today. There is really no harm to be done by further providing these whales with elevated protected status and moving the conversation forward in Oregon, and also showing the public how important this species is to the state. And as Quinn has already said once today, and you'll probably hear several more times, these whales need all of the help they can get. And we're asking you to play a role today in aiding the Southern residents in every way we possibly can. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Sophia. We'll go to Colleen Weiler.
Chair Walt. Colleen is not in the room at this time.
Oh, okay. Then Kathleen Callaghy, and if you'll fix the pronunciation of your last name since I probably got it wrong.
That's me, Commissioner Wall. And you did a wonderful job. Most people don't pronounce the G, so good job.
If I could just get the right person, right?
That's okay. That's okay. Chair Wall, Commissioners, my name is Kathleen Callaghy. I'm a Northwest representative for Defenders of Wildlife, who I know you're all familiar with. And this is my first time speaking before you, so please be kind. Defenders of Wildlife has 2.1 million members and supporters across the U.S., including over 49,000 who reside here in Oregon. And I cannot emphasize enough how important this species is to them. Every orca-related alert we've sent to Oregonians in the past year has achieved a 98 to 99% action rate. They always click. But more importantly, these whales are an intelligent and sophisticated species with culture and emotions and deep memory, and that's all scientifically verified. They have foraged in these coastal waters for millennia since before they were called Oregon's waters. My colleagues and ODFW staff have already attested to the scientific justification for listing this species. I want to comment on the urgency of doing so. Between salmon decline, pollution, human noise, and traffic, the southern resident orcas population is on the brink of collapse. Existing efforts by NOAA and Washington State are not enough. And I absolutely acknowledge, Chair Wall, your statement about Oregon's leadership on salmon recovery, which is much appreciated. But even so, salmon recovery takes time. And as Sophia said, in the near term, we need every state to step up on those short-term and medium-term actions that can assist in their recovery. And you've already discussed some of them: aligning vessel buffer regulations, promoting nearshore salmon habitat restoration, and improving water quality. All of these things can help. Recovering the species is squarely within ODFW's mission and mandate. The southern resident killer whale is an indigenous species that swims these waters, and they are depleting rapidly. There were 88 individuals when the population was listed under the federal ESA in 2005. Today, there are 73, and a single catastrophic oil spill could wipe them out completely. So we know this will take work. Nobody disputes that, but the work is warranted, and we stand ready to do it with you. We'll help you find the resources. We'll help you chart the way forward. We have to. So I join my colleagues in asking you to accept staff recommendation and proceed to rulemaking with this petition. Thank you.
Thank you. Since there aren't any other humans besides the two of you in front, I'm assuming that it really is virtual. Yes. Thank you to you too. So I will go to the virtual ones, Deborah Giles and then Joy Primrose. Deborah?
Hi, thank you so much for allowing me to give testimony today and for holding this important hearing. My name is Deborah Giles. I'm the Science and Research Director at the nonprofit Wild Orca. I've been studying southern resident killer whales since 2005, the year of their federal listing as an endangered species. We conduct research on whale feces to assess the health of individual whales and by extension, the population. One thing is abundantly clear: the southern residents are nutritionally deprived, which is leading to a high rate of preterm miscarriages and calves who are born but die right away. Oregon's waters play a critical role in feeding the southern residents. Research on satellite tagged southern resident killer whales show that they spend a disproportionate amount of time at the mouth of the Columbia, especially when the Chinook are returning from their time in Alaska. Indeed, fecal samples and prey analysis remains show that Chinook salmon are the whale's primary food source on the outer coast, with over half the Chinook coming from the Columbia Basin. Not only are Chinook salmon fewer in number, they have decreased in size, forcing the whales to forage farther and longer for the same amount of nutrition. Prior to 1850, Chinook salmon were massive in size, some measuring nearly 5 feet tall and weighing over 120 pounds. Today, according to the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife's webpage, the average size of the ocean-caught Chinook salmon is between 12 and 15 pounds, puny by comparison to their ancestors. Chinook and other salmon species continue to decline coast-wide, as is evidenced by the listing from NOAA Fisheries of 28 population groups of salmon and steelhead on the West Coast as threatened or endangered under the Endangered Species Act. And these are the very populations of salmon that are vital to the southern resident killer whale's survival. Simply put, to recover the southern residents, we need the state of Oregon to join British Columbia, the state of Washington, and the federal government to list this distinct population of whales as endangered. We need to work together and better manage resources, especially salmon from the Columbia River Basin. These whales are a unique population, both genetically and culturally, and they deserve our help, protection, and our hard work to help them recover. It is through no fault of theirs that they are declining. Only by working closely together, by amplifying and coordinating our efforts, will we be able to mitigate the harm we have caused these highly intelligent and social marine mammals. As a killer whale scientist and as a conservation biologist, I respectfully ask the state of Oregon to list the southern residents as an endangered species. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity to provide comment. I have been studying these whales for nearly 2 decades. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I just want to reiterate our interest in helping educate, inform, guide, partner with you in any way needed in order to have these whales listed in Oregon. As Sophia said, These are not just Washington's whales, but rather Oregon's and California's as well. So thank you very much, and thanks for your time.
Thank you. I don't see questions at this point, so we'll move right on, but thank you very much. Go ahead, Joy.
Chair Wall and commissioners, thank you for allowing me to provide comment today. My name is Joy Primrose. I am with the American Cetacean Society, and I am the president of the Oregon chapter. We're a nonprofit that works on whale conservation. Oregonians love and are concerned about the endangered southern resident killer whales. They spend time here off the Oregon coast feeding and migrating between their foraging grounds. Many people report to and follow the Orca Network Whale Sightings Report for sightings off Oregon. The Oceanic Ecology Research Group has an Oregon Coast Killer Whale Sightings Facebook group with over 9,000 followers. In both of these sightings reports groups, there is very high excitement when any of the southern resident pods are seen off of Oregon. Our volunteers talk with thousands of people each year at our educational programs and tabling events, including our Orca Action Month tables. We receive many questions about the southern resident orcas. Oregonians are concerned about their declining population and are interested in their recovery, including ways to help the orcas. The southern resident orca population depends on Oregon's nearshore and inland waters to support thriving salmon populations they depend on as a food source, particularly Chinook salmon runs. When people ask what Oregon is doing to help their beloved southern resident orcas, we have to say Oregon has not invested in direct action to conserve these orcas. One way to show all the Oregonians who love and care about the endangered southern resident orca population that Oregon cares is to list them as endangered under the Oregon Endangered Species Act. And we recommend and support having the listing under the Oregon Endangered Species Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. We don't have additional questions right now, but we do have a comment from one of the commissioners.
After staff comes back. Or after staff.
Okay,
Thank you.
we'll trade you out, if you will. John and Mike, thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Unless, does anybody have questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Yes. I just was trying to remember, again, the doctor to my left gave a talk on Tahlequah, which the task force called J35. But I'm sure that's not what she calls herself, however they squeak to each other. But when did Washington list them? Was it 2018?
Do you know?
Do we know?
Chair Wall, Commissioner.
2005.
2005.
That's when Washington listed them? They listed them in 2005?
Chair Wall, Commissioner King, that was on our list of things to find, and we only found the federal listings.
The federal listing is 2005, I thought, but I don't.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. There's probably others that know, but when the Washington state listing occurred.
Okay. No. Sorry?
Washington state listed them prior to the federal government.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions before we go to Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde?
I just had a question. This is probably for Director Melcher. Whose jurisdiction is it, like the vessel noise question or the distance from a vessel? Is that an Oregon legislature thing, or is that where does that go?
Chair Wall and Commissioner Hadfield-Hyde, certainly the legislature has full, I mean, they can make laws around any of those and many other subjects in terms of rulemaking authority, regulatory authority. I think, you know, of course, the State Marine Board has some, but they don't register, you know, maritime vessels or federally licensed fishing vessels. So I don't think they actually have authority over those vessels. I think then it may be the Coast Guard, but we'd have to dig in and get you know, more detail.
Okay.
Obviously, I think we're gonna have plenty of time to get those details
Right.
for you.
I'm just curious. I'm just curious.
Over
you
the
know,
next year or two.
what the, you know, but it's not something that we would have direct jurisdiction over.
Chair Wall and Commissioner Hadfield, no.
Yeah.
Certainly not over vessel noise. And I think what the Washington legislature recently passed was not related directly to what vessel noise. It was related to distance from
charters.
Yeah, vessels had to maintain a certain distance from killer whales, and that certainly there's a foundation there in perhaps in noise disturbance, but it probably has other. There's probably other motivations as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Spellbrink, are you trying to ask a question?
Well, I was just going to mention that,
up.
Chair Wall, that sometimes, you know, you might have a little hard time. I spent 40 some years on the ocean and saw quite a few orcas in my career. And there would be lots of times, you know, we'd be running crab here just idling along, and you see them go by offshore, and they would make a right-hand turn or left-hand turn, depending which way they were going, and come over and check out, you know. I mean, so we always thought, kind of enjoyed it. They come by, you check you out, and then take off again, you know. So, I mean, sometimes it's a little hard to stay away from them.
Yeah.
If they come to you. Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde, is there another?
No. Oh my gosh.
I'll comment after Commissioner Labhart does.
Okay, Commissioner Labhart.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna read this. It's not too long, so don't bear with me. So, you know, the ORS is 496-176. And Kathleen, is it Kathleen? Yes. You did a great job. Hope to hear you testify again in the future. The ORS states that a determination that a species is endangered shall be based on documented and verifiable scientific information about the species' biological status. To list a species as endangered, we are to determine that the natural reproductive potential of the species is in danger of failure due to limited population numbers, disease, predation, and other natural or human actions affecting its continued existence, and to the extent possible, assess the relative impact of human actions. In addition, we are required to determine that one or more of the following factors exists. A, that most populations are undergoing imminent or active deterioration in their range or primary habitat. B, that the overutilization of commercial, recreation, scientific, or educational purposes is occurring or is likely to occur. Or C, the existence of state or federal programs or regulations are inadequate to protect the species or its habitat. If the petition is found to present such information, the commission shall commence rulemaking. Without going into a lot more detail that was provided to us by the petitioners, it is clear to me that they have met the factors for listing as endangered. The petitioners have done a complete and thorough job of addressing the criteria for listing. They have provided factual, peer-reviewed, biological, and scientific information regarding the biology, critical habitat, population status, threats, recovery actions, and the validity of the petition that we are required to rule on, and not the emotions surrounding the issue, which is important, but not what we can rule on. Staff has reviewed the petition in detail with an independent eye based on their scientific and biological expertise, and have concluded the following, quote, based on the staff's review, the Southern Resident Killer Whale petition submitted to the commission and our independent review of available scientific information, the petition appears to provide documented and substantial scientific information to warrant the requested action to list the Southern Killer Whale DPS as an endangered under the Oregon Endangered Species Act, unquote. I concur with and support the petitioner's request and the staff's recommendation to accept the petition and proceed to rulemaking as outlined in ORS 496-176, and we should begin the process to initiate rulemaking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Khalil.
Great. Yes, as Dr. Leslie / Commissioner King mentioned, the southern resident killer whales have a very near and dear place to my heart, particularly the J-pod. Tahlequah, the whale that she mentioned, or the dolphin that she mentioned, carried her dead baby for 17 days in an act of mourning, which triggered a massive outpouring of empathy, support, love, care, grief, and community building within the Salish Sea region. And so, Becky, to your earlier point of seeing these sad stories come up over and over again, it reminds me of that time of Tahlequah's grieving and mourning, and remembering that how much that brought people together, and what an incredible opportunity that was to shed light on such an incredible animal, one of the only ones to also have spindle neurons that process emotion like we do. So if it's okay, I'll make the motion. When we're ready, I'll be happy to make the motion. But just wanted to put it out there that this is going to be an exciting conversation that'll hopefully bring people together, however hard it may be.
Yeah, I would further that. I've often said, and that's why I wanted the dates, because that did happen in 2018. And to me, in my background, in terms of, being Black and American and what Emmett Till meant, and what his pictures of his open casket of his mutilated body meant, to me, that just watching that Tahlequah moment was the equivalent. That was like an Emmett Till mother moment. Like, she purposely displayed her baby to a city of 4 million people. And you're right, like, use that pain for something positive, and use that pain to say, you know what, we're talking about orca. We're also talking about the Grand Ronde, which is nowhere near the Salish Sea, but that's the kind of habitat we need to rehab to help the Chinook, to in turn help the orca. So it really does have to be a whole bigger, larger thing that we are talking about. So yes, happy to support the motion, but yes, given that Commissioner Khalil has done talks on Tahlequah and is versed in the zoos and the aquariums, this is definitely her purvey.
Could we have a comment from Commissioner Zarnowitz first, and then we can go to that, and then we'll go ahead.
I was on the ferry in San Juan Islands maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and the ferry shut off its engine or idled its engine, and next to us was 3 orca, a male, a female, and a baby. So that was pretty moving. Anyway, I would like to add at the end of the motion, in other words, that the commencement of rulemaking will be within 1 year. So I'll go ahead and make the motion.
Are we ready? Okay.
If you could add that in,
yes,
I'd appreciate it.
I move to commence a rulemaking process within 1 year to consider adding the southern resident orca to the state endangered species list, as the petition presented substantial scientific information to justify commencement of rulemaking. Is that the right place to put it?
Within 1 year. She did.
I put it in the, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to commence a rulemaking process within a year, as was just read into the record. And the two motion makers, Khalil made the motion and King seconded it. And let's call the roll on this one, if you will, please.
Khalil?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
Labhart?
Yes.
Spellbrink?
Yes.
Hatfield Hyde?
Yes.
Zarnowitz?
Yes.
Wall?
Yes. We have an executive session, which we are going to delay until our next meeting. So we are adjourned, and I thank all of you. It was a long day. Appreciate your work and your testimony, and see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
There we go.